Growth. Growth is an important concept, and especially now. As I'm taping this, I'm in the middle of earnings season. What is earnings season? It's when companies report their quarterly earnings, and at the end of their fiscal, they'll report their annual earnings. It's very important for a company to make the earnings projections or the earnings targets that they advertised in the previous quarter and the previous year. It is also very important for them to continue to guide towards growth, to say next quarter, next year, we will continue on our current growth trajectory, or maybe we'll accelerate growth. Maybe we've identified some new opportunities. And throughout the entire series, we talk about growth and how, as a data scientist strategist, you are pivotal in helping the business to grow, both from a business model and operating model perspective. You're bringing new opportunities for growth to the C-suite. That, now more than ever, more than any time over the last 10 years, that is a critical function because growth is no longer easy. We talked about this a little bit with the changing of the macro factors and how growth that used to come easy, organically, without effort, is now going to become difficult, especially that organic growth, which means the company is able to find growth opportunities on its own and using its existing business model or operating model, possibly with some transformations, it is able to grow and move forward. Sometimes growth comes from entirely new business models. It depends on the scope of the opportunity that really you help the business find. But now more than ever, the focus of the C-suite is on identifying new growth opportunities because growth's getting hard. It's getting difficult. So what we need to understand is really, when it comes to organic growth, how do we help the business understand what technology can do and why data science and machine learning performs better than some other technologies? And we can take our cue from, cloud companies. If you look at a company like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, they are all cloud services providers. You rent some time on their servers and you get compute. You get access to compute power. Now for them, at some point, there's a plateau. We've been talking about this ceiling. There will only be so much workload, only so much of that, of companies' workloads that get pushed into the cloud. At some point, that's going to plateau. Now, when it does, organic growth that happens just because it's happening for everyone, that stops. What do you do when that happens? Well, it sounds forward-looking. You're thinking, workloads in the cloud are just going to continue to rise and rise, but eventually they'll hit a plateau. And that's something that every business model, no matter how lucrative it seems today, every business model, even a juggernaut like cloud, will at some point end its organic growth. It's growth on its own without really having to do anything. You can look at a company like Netflix. Netflix has struggled to attract new users and maintain its initial growth trajectory. It right now is challenged to figure out how to monetize each user better so that it can grow revenue organically. That's a huge challenge right now for Netflix. It will eventually be the same challenge for Google, Amazon, and Microsoft when it comes to their workloads in the cloud. Now, how would they figure out a way to increase the monetization of everyone that does a workload on their server? How would they even measure and figure out what would be the right way to go about that? Well, if you look at users, we have a metric, KPI, average revenue per user. That really measures how efficiently the business can monetize every single user. The higher the average revenue per user, the more efficient their business model is at monetizing each one of those users. And it's an important metric. What would be a similar metric for a cloud workload? Well, then you begin to look at, what's the revenue generator? And in this case, it's really a compute resource. Say a CPU, GPU, TPU, all of the U's that are available to us to use for our data science and machine learning workflows. So what would an equivalent be? It would be average revenue per CPU, per GPU, per TPU, because you have multiple opportunities to evaluate. There are any number of ways that you can monetize each one of those GPUs. But now the challenge is to monetize each one of them better, to become more efficient, and to have more revenue generated by a stagnating workload. So basically what we're saying is, if workloads stagnate, if the number of GPU hours or CPU hours stagnates, we then have to become more efficient at monetizing each hour of that resource's time. Now, how would you do that? Now that you have the KPI to measure, you have something that's very important to look at, and you have a pretty good justification for why average revenue per GPU would be important as something to measure. Now you would look at which workflows or which workloads will increase your average revenue per GPU. And you think about SageMaker or any one of the auto ML, auto AI, canned AI services that the big three cloud providers offer. Now, every hour of GPU time that runs, say, a SageMaker job is generating more revenue than an hour of that same GPU running for an EC2 job. If that's the case, then SageMaker is more efficient at monetizing that 1 hour of GPU time or CPU time than EC2. Now, what if you wanted to compare, say, your basic software development, some sort of SaaS application, to a machine learning application? If you compared machine learning offerings, machine learning products that run on the cloud versus a traditional SaaS or software service product that runs on the cloud, and you did an hour-to-hour comparison of the average revenue generated by machine learning versus the average revenue generated by software, you should see an increase in the ability for something like machine learning as a technology to monetize that 1 hour of GPU time versus a traditional SaaS workload. And you can use that internally too. You're hearing me say this and you're thinking to yourself, oh, this would be a great way to compare how well, how efficiently a technology, when we talk about technology model, this is really a great KPI to explain the difference between your traditional software and how it is monetized versus machine learning services, how well those are monetized. This is the important piece of explaining growth to the business. Not every technology provides the same growth efficiency. You often have to create KPIs to help the business understand that a driver for growth today, for Facebook and Netflix and everyone else, it was users, and users were growing and growing and growing, and nobody could understand or even imagine that that growth would ever stop, but it did. Netflix is seeing stagnation. Facebook a while back did too. And they had to figure out ways to continue to grow new users, which they are basically now looking at every user on the planet. How many people can we get an internet connection to as a way to increase users? But more importantly, Netflix and Facebook are both looking for ways to become more efficient in how they monetize each one of the users. And the power of a KPI to show a business at some point, this thing right now that you think will run forever, at some point it will stop being an organic driver of growth. And so we must be looking forward to what happens when that line plateaus, when growth no longer happens on its own, or it's very expensive to come by, when the average cost of bringing in a new user, a new hour of workload, or anything that your business happens to monetize, when the cost of acquiring another hour goes up and up and up and no longer becomes the most efficient, the easiest avenue for your business to grow, what then? What other options and alternatives does the business have access to, which could allow organic growth to be sustained? This is very important when it comes to identifying opportunities and helping the business understand how you as a data scientist or just the data science team in general can provide the business with opportunities for growth, these KPIs are critical because you are reframing the conversation from we will grow forever, which won't ever happen, to we need to prepare for a time when we can no longer depend on this thing which we have really hung our hats on. And so now we need to look at new sources of growth. Machine learning is one of them. But why should we put $1 into machine learning instead of putting $1 into a traditional software product, traditional SaaS product? Well, you can use KPIs like this, where you stabilize the growth of the commodity that the business is used to selling. We've talked about users. We talked about compute resources. These could be cars. If you look at Tesla, they are finding new ways to improve how well they monetize every single car. And they're using software to do that. When you stabilize that and say, this will no longer grow, this thing that we are used to growing will no longer grow, and we must become more efficient in monetizing each one of this stagnating number of commodities that we sell. And then you can start comparing which technologies are most efficient. You can also look at what changes to the business model and the operating model will make any given technology more efficient at monetizing that stagnating commodity that the business sells. This is critical now because growth is so hard to come by. And you're going to need to teach the business. Number one, machine learning provides more efficient growth opportunities than alternatives. And number two, in many cases, machine learning is the only growth opportunity creator. It is the only one available to the business. And it's important for the business to realize it will not grow forever. If they think growth is eternal and it'll never stop, they won't invest in saving themselves from the eventual plateau that comes to every business. So even though right now it's hard to imagine cloud workloads stagnating, it is so hard to really wrap your head around that. You can see the bigger cloud players are already preparing for that eventuality by optimizing how well they monetize every incremental use of their eventually stagnating, just compute resources, commodity, the one that they sell. Use exactly the same tactic where you hold that thing which has been growing out of control steady and say, look, when the time comes, we need something else. And here is what I propose. Here's why machine learning is the most efficient growth engine compared to all the other opportunities that we have. KPIs are powerful storytellers. And one KPI, in this case, average revenue per CPU, GPU, or TPU, one KPI can tell a rich story if you put the right data around it and if you understand from a business perspective the drivers of change and what types of value conversations will drive the types of behaviors you need to help your business succeed.